That was Orleans with the title track from their hit album of 1975, Let There Be Music. Founding member John Hall joins us now. He's just released his autobiography called Still the One, A Rock and Roll Journey to Congress and Back. John, welcome to the show, and I'd like to begin by asking you about your early musical life, your formative years before forming the band Orleans.
Well, I was living in Saugerties, which is the town to the east of Woodstock, New York, and I always thought of it as the Lower East Side of Woodstock because it's a little less expensive. It's outside the Catskill Park Blue Line, so it's fairly bucolic, especially at the time, and very musically and artistically fertile town. I started playing guitar when I was 11, but before that I played piano. I had 11 years of classical piano, starting when I was 5, and learned most of the theory that I know, the harmonic and rhythmic and melodic theory that I know from piano. Going back to when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, the Weavers, folk group with Pete Seeger, were very influential on me, and my grandmother, who lived in Providence, had those records, and whenever I went up there, I remember I was small enough that I could kneel in front of this big wooden RCA radio that my dad had somehow jury-rigged a turntable into.
Wow. And
listen to Pete Seeger and the Weavers. But then after that, it was, as I grew older and started to play electric guitar, it was Peter Palmieri and the Kingston Trio for a while, and then it was the Ventures and the Beach Boys, and then, jumping through, other bands. It was the Beatles. When they hit, I was like all about the Beatles. And then Jimi Hendrix, who actually met, in my book there's a story about my band Kangaroo, which I was playing bass in at the time, playing at the Café Wa in Greenwich Village, and Jimi Hendrix coming and sitting in the front row, at the beginning of our set and staying there for the entire set, so that our lead guitar player was playing with his foot on Jimmy's table. And right next door, the Fugs and David Bromberg were playing around the corner at the Night Owl Cafe. The Love and Spoonful had just had their first hit with Do You Believe in Magic, and they were off on the road, to the big time. And the replacement at the Night Owl as house band for The Love and Spoonful was a band called The Flying Machine, lead singer of which was James Taylor, who played electric rhythm guitar and sang. And if I went across the street on a break from the Café Wa, I'd see at the Kettle of Fish Cafe, there'd be at the bar Bob Dylan sitting talking with Tim Hardin. I mean, it was a time of incredible fertility and explosion of music coming out of New York's Greenwich Village scene that really none of us, well, I certainly didn't know that it would be historical, not just very entertaining and exciting, but in retrospect, a historical time.
Yeah, indeed. So we go from your first band, Kangaroo, to your session and songwriting work with Janis Joplin, Seals and Crofts, and Taj Mahal, among others. But in 1972, you formed the group Orleans, with the nucleus being yourself, Wells Kelly, Larry Hoppin, and his brother Lance. The group records 2 albums for ABC Dunhill Records, who, for some reason, chose not to release the albums in the States, but only released them overseas, right? In the
Well, they put the first one out.
Okay.
The first one was kind of a regional hit in the Northeast, and it was all the colleges that we had played at, which were a lot in the Northeast. That record I heard many times playing out the window of a dorm room. And then the second album, which had a version, not the final version, but a version of Dance With Me on it, ABC refused to release except in Europe because they said they didn't hear a hit on it. Yeah, we signed to Asylum Records after ABC dropped us, and we did a couple of showcases at a club in New York called Max's Kansas City, which I'm sorry to say is long gone, but it was a great club while it lasted. And And one of them we had two record company execs at, Mary Martin from Warner Brothers and Chuck Plotkin from Asylum, who was sent by David Geffen to scout us out, I guess. Anyway, Asylum Records, which was David Geffen's label, the one that he started, that had the Eagles on it, and Joni Mitchell on it, and Jackson Browne on it. It was a boutique label distributed by the Warner chain, I think. But we were in really good company. We felt like, wow, what a great bunch of artists to be associated with. And so even though we were an East Coast band, a lot of people thought of us as a West Coast band because we were signed to Asylum and sort of lumped in with the, not that I mind at all being artistically lumped in with any of those people, Jackson or Joni or the Eagles. But so we wound up making two records for Asylum, and the first one had the hit version of Dance With Me on it, and Let There Be Music, which was the title track, got into the top 40, and then the second one, Still the One, was the single, and it was, and still is, a staple of radio and other platforms. Just was certified by BMI as having recorded 7 million airplays in the United States alone.
Wow. I want to talk about the song Dance With Me for just a moment. You wrote that with your then-wife and songwriting partner, Joanna, and it's a beautiful piece of music. Obviously, anyone listening to this is going to recognize that song when we play it, but it's always felt to me like there was a sense of adolescent yearning going on in that song.
Well, we were adolescents, and we were definitely yearning. Well, we were actually in our 20s, but you're still, now that I'm older and wiser, I realize that 20 is really still adolescence.
Yeah.
That song, it's interesting. Songs can be written so many different ways, and sometimes, people ask me or any songwriter, like, what comes first, the music or the lyrics, or, where do you get your inspiration from? And there's really no right or wrong answer. It comes in all different fashions. And in terms of Dance With Me, it came to me as an instrumental guitar piece. I was sitting around the house playing that melody on the guitar. Da 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 da.
Right.
Da 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 da. I had the entire song, bridge and all. Everything was all worked out on the acoustic guitar. And Johanna was yelling from the other end of the house, saying, "Sounds like Dance With Me." And I said, "Can't we find something that's not quite so, ordinary?" And she said, "No, I really think that's it." And then we were riding back from a gig in Ithaca, I think it was, back to the Woodstock area, and she said, pick the beat up and kick your feet up. And she started scribbling on the ubiquitous envelope.
Right.
And by the time we got home, she'd finished the lyric to it. Chet Atkins told me when I was, he recorded that song and did a great finger-picking version of it, instrumental, of course.
Right.
And he was one of my early heroes. I learned to play, I think the first song I learned on guitar was Glowworm. Glow the worm, glimmer, glimmer, off a Chet Atkins record that he did, playing, bass and rhythm and lead all at the same time with his finger picking. And so Chet, when I finally met him, and he had recorded Dance With Me, and he recorded Sales from the Waking and Dreaming album, and I finally got to meet him and write a couple songs with him, and sit in his living room and play guitar with him, which was, wow, what a thrill. Talk about closing a circle, And but he said, "You really know how to bring it home there, John."
Wow.
It's like it's a neat little circle. It goes out there, and the melody and the harmony, takes this little trip, and it comes back home again. I said, "Well, thank you." Not that every song should always come home like that, but it makes it more memorable. It wraps up in a little package with a bow on it so that people can remember it.
Our guest today is founding member and songwriter for the band Orleans, John Hall. His book is called Still the One, A Rock and Roll Journey to Congress and Back. And I'd like to ask about the song we briefly mentioned, one you also wrote with your songwriting partner, Joanna, and one that gave you the title of your book, Still the One.
Yeah, Still the One was a lyric first. She wrote, a friend of hers asked, who was going through a divorce, asked her to write a song about people staying together because there's so many people breaking up. And she wrote the lyric out and handed it to me on the back of an envelope, complete, and I wrote the music to that in probably 10 minutes. And that wound up being our single biggest, song that we've ever written.
Just a classic pop single. Now, that song is from your Waking and Dreaming album of 1976, and that record sports a very famous cover photo where you guys are all shirtless. And it's almost like the message is, ladies, here we are.
Well, here's the story.
Okay.
We had a 2-hour photo session. At the end of the photo session, the photographer had a piece of tape on the floor, and he said, I want you all standing on this piece of tape. I don't care how you have to bump into each other or drape over each other, whatever, but you all, I'm going to just snap pictures, and you all stay on that piece of tape and try not to fall off of it. So we're all crammed together, and at the end of 2 hours, he goes, I got 2 shots left. Why don't we try it with all of your shirts off? So we had jeans on and no shirts for the last 2, and wouldn't you know, one of those is the one the record company picks to be the cover. They had to, because Kmart wouldn't carry the record because they thought we were nude, Kmart insisted that they airbrush in the top of our jeans. So if you look really closely at the cover, you'll see a little bit of blue on a couple of our waists, which actually was airbrushed because the jeans were sagging lower than that. But, it's funny. When I ran 2006 for my first term in Congress, my opponent tried to use that against me, and my wife said, that'll probably get you more votes than it'll lose.
Yeah, that's true.
And, not all of us look that svelte nowadays as we did then.
Well, it's interesting to me that right after the 1-2 punch of those hit albums, you left the band, which seems really quick considering the success.
I wrote about that in the book, too, in my memoir, Still the One, A Rock and Roll Journey to Congress and Back, which is available on Amazon and CreateSpace.com or on our Facebook page. But, how bands break up, I wrote about how after Still the One, I couldn't leave well enough alone. And I think that goes for probably everybody in the band being dissatisfied with something that was going on. And it's hard being together all the time. It's like being married to 4 or 5 guys,
Right.
Got everybody in the bus, all the time, and everybody backstage and then on stage and then rehearsal hall and then in the studio. And you go for 4 or 5 years of concentrated togetherness, trying your hardest to put out this creative energy and ideas that you have. And it turns sometimes into kind of a love-hate relationship where you know that you really love these guys or gals in some cases,
right.
and you know that it's doing everybody a world of good to keep working together, but there's some things, little idiosyncrasies or tick. Nobody's perfect. Nobody is a perfect human being. Everybody's got something they do that bugs somebody else. And if you're together 24 hours a day for 4 or 5 years, you start to notice those things. And, Timothy V. Schmidt, I think it was, said, referring to the Eagles and their split, he said that every band he's ever been in has always been on the verge of breaking up. And that made me laugh because I've been in a few bands besides Orleans, and, there's some truth in that.
But as I understand it, Orleans is back, isn't it?
Yeah. We're playing together again since I got elected to Congress, served 2 terms, and then got unelected from Congress. In 2010, I've been back with the band now for a few years, and we played all over the country. September, we're playing in Louisville and St. Louis and the Carolinas and way out east on Long Island, actually, in Jamesport, Long Island, and working on a gig in Woodstock, which I hope will actually come through, although I don't know for sure yet. Orleans is a performing unit that's still together with a couple of different people replacing the ones who've gone on to the next life. So that's one exciting thing that's going on. And then for me, the other exciting thing that's going on is I just finished my memoir, starting when I was, just beginning to get into music and making my way to, success in the music business, getting more involved with environmental causes, and then talked into running for office, first at the county level, then the school board, and then Congress. And, winning, what it's like campaigning, what it's like trying to raise that kind of money.
Right.
What it was like when I was in there, there are stories in the book from Janis Joplin's birthday party in her house in Marin County to stories from the conversations in the elevator in the Capitol building, with members of both sides of the aisle, on the way up to the floor for a vote, and travels that I took to Afghanistan and Israel and the West Bank and Iraq. And, while I was there, we had troops in all those places, and I went to visit them, especially the troops from New York State and troops from my district. And I also served as the chairman of the subcommittee on veterans' disabilities, which gave me an opportunity to pass legislation unanimously, I might add, which is important to note in this day and age that it can be done. The Veterans Claims Modernization Act of 2008, which passed in both Senate and House without a single member of either party voting no, and then was signed by President George W. Bush in his second term. He signed it into law and called it good government. And I was as shocked as anybody because, it's all common sense stuff to try to help do away with the epidemic of veterans, bankruptcies, divorces, homelessness, and suicides. We got to do something to, take better care of our men and women in uniform after they come back home and they're not in uniform anymore and they're officially known as veterans, but too many of them are abandoned by the system.
Well, that's certainly a worthy cause. John, I want to thank you so much for appearing on the show today, and there's so much more we could have covered, like your work with Bonnie Raitt and organizing the No Nukes concert, but we'll leave these topics for the reader to discover when they get your book, which is called, once again, Still the One, A Rock and Roll Journey to Congress and Back, by our guest today, John Hall. John, where can people get the book?
Well, if you're on Facebook, you can go to, this is not endorsing any company or particular cause. Anyway, facebook.com/johnhall.memoir will take you to our page for the book. And you can also go to johnhallmusic.com, a website that I've had for some time that not only tells how and where to get the book, but my schedule and Orleans' schedule as well. And those two places are probably the simplest way to explain it. It's available on Amazon, on CreateSpace, but if you go through our Facebook page, you'll get a discount code for the paperback if you want to buy the paperback. And we're offering the Kindle ebook download at a special introductory price of $4.99. So it's a thank you to all my supporters and fans and followers, both musically and politically. And I think I'm told by quite a few people that it's a good read. So
yeah,
I'm way too close to it myself, but I think it might be.